I am with Hajra Rehman today. She has been on the Inequality project before. And for the month of Ramadan, she wrote an article on what it meant for her, especially this year in these peculiar COVID circumstances. And we wanted to talk about Islam a little bit more at large because there's quite a huge issue on a global scale of Islam being misconstrued and Muslim people being, um, you know, regarded in a light that isn't who they really are and oppressed and hugely mistreated as a result of that misconstruction. So yeah, Hashra, thank you so much for giving us your first-hand experience
My pleasure.
with this issue as a Muslim woman. Um, how did you first come into contact with Islam? Like, which were your first feelings towards it?
Well, I guess the default way most people come by religion is they are born into it rather than, statistically speaking, than, so-called converting to it. So I was born in a conservative Muslim family. My parents were first generation immigrants from Pakistan, which is a very conservative, still today, conservative Muslim country, and we came to the UK. But fortunately, some people unfortunately would say that it's unfortunate, but the UK has a huge Muslim community because of, colonial links in Muslim countries. So there's a huge British Muslim community, which I was part of when I lived in the UK as a child. Growing up, I was 3 times a week sent to the mosque to learn the Quran, to learn how to pray. I had an imam who would teach me weekly. My parents would always teach me at home because they had a much deeper rooted Islamic traditional upbringing than I did, living in a Western environment. So they would always sort of remind us, of me and my brother, of our roots. When I was 11, my family relocated to Saudi Arabia. As we know, that's one of the most conservative Islamic countries in the world. There, the country is governed by in Sharia law. Some would say in a very inflexible interpretation of it. When I had to go out in public gatherings, I'd have to wear a long black dress called the abaya, and back then I also used to cover my head. That rule has changed now. Women don't have to cover their head, but they still need to wear the abaya. There would be, it's compulsory for men to go to the mosque to pray. Men and women can't go outside together in public unless it's your husband, your brother, or your father. Um, there's no alcohol. So basically, all the key rules stated in the Quran were implemented in my formative years, which were my teenage years. So this obviously had a huge effect on me because I had a deeply Islamic lifestyle, both from my parents and from my nurture, my surroundings, my environment, the country which I lived in as well. And also when I lived in Saudi, a lot of it wasn't a choice. It was something which was forced upon me because of, the Sharia regime within Saudi, which is slightly modernizing and progressing slowly, still some would say behind compared to other countries, but it's making its way, and women's rights in Saudi are increasing, which is good. But at the time when I went in 2008, it was still very much the stereotype of what you hear in media, less rights for women, a very patriarchal society, very family orientated, very just focused on faith rather than, progressing with faith. So that's a short background. And then obviously, when I was 18, I came back to the UK to pursue my further studies at university. So when I came back, obviously, it was a bit of a culture shock coming from the West, from the East to the West, sorry, and, seeing this, completely open, liberal atmosphere of, being able to do what you want when you want. And that's, not something, I was used to because I lived in a place where if I wanted to go out, I had to be, have a chaperone with me, and it wasn't safe for women to go out. I couldn't drink alcohol if I wanted to. I couldn't, be in the presence of a male unless it was my brother or my dad. So that was definitely a cultural shock for me. And in some ways, because I sort of got distracted by this sort of very new lifestyle, I sort of, forgot my very foundations, and the spirituality within me faded within the past few years. So that, in a nutshell, is my sort of experience with Islam so far.
In your opinion, what is the link between Islam and politics? Do you think it has historically been misconstrued, as we were saying, in this sense? And what do you think it genuinely asks for?
Well, I definitely think that, not just in, the 21st century, the 20th century, but for centuries, Islam has been sort of appropriated and misused by so-called right-wing tyrannical regimes. If you look into and read the Quran, you'll find that the Prophet Muhammad was, a lot of his beliefs and teachings, matched left-wing ideals of today. He believed in social justice, in giving the people who should be given the most are the people who are born with the least. So the working classes, the lower classes, those are the priorities of society. He believed in taxation. Every Muslim has an obligation to donate not just 2.5% of their current income, but 2.5% of their entire net worth, and that goes without exception, unless of course, you are a member of the lower class yourselves, in which you're exempt from this rule because you don't have the money. But if you do have the money, you have the obligation to give back to the working classes, and then also caring for each other, like as it's a collective community. We have a responsibility to feed and clothe one another. When someone is hurt, to stop and ask them and to help them. And that applies to whether, someone is Muslim or non-Muslim. The Prophet Muhammad was known to have a good relationship with people of other religions, with Jews, with Christians. In a court case in the city of Medina, when there was a dispute between a Jew and a Muslim, and this was under a Muslim regime, the Jewish person actually won in that case against the Muslims. So that sort of shows that there was fairness between all religions. And, it is stated in the Quran that no Arab is superior to a non-Arab. There's no white over black. We are all equals as human beings, and we all deserve the respect and dignity as we would treat, a member of our own community and a member of our own family. So definitely things like wealth inequality, social justice, treating minorities especially with favor, because those are the ones who are, often on the fringes of society. So definitely these left-wing ideals are, what I personally and a lot of people believe has been lost in Islam, and indeed in the Islamic Golden Age, from 800 AD to 1200 AD. This was the Islamic Golden Age, and left-wing ideals were endorsed and implemented by the Islamic regimes within the Middle East. There was less wealth inequality. There was investment within human life for the human individual. There was investment in welfare state, and the leaders of the Islamic world, they used science hand in hand with their faith to progress and to find medical solutions, progress in advancements, infrastructure, all these sort of things. So there was really a golden age of Islam when they followed left-wing ideals. Unfortunately, things fell apart with wars and invasions and such, and the right wing hijacked the scriptures of Islam to promote their own ideals and to create, to maintain power, because there was so much political unrest that it became almost Machiavellian, in the sense that leaders were obsessed with maintaining power, and the best way for someone to maintain power by any means necessary is is not democracy, but to use an autocratic and tyrannical system, which was used in Islamic regimes. And this has continued on today. In the Middle East, there are dictators. There was the Arab Spring, where many dictators were overthrown over several years, and they endorsed numerous right-wing policies, such as, only taxation for the rich, persecution of ethnic minorities, a very us versus them mentality, no freedom of speech, no freedom of choice, allying in the West with right-wing governments. So for centuries, this has been the case in Islam, and it's a shame because there was a time when Islam was really blossoming, and it was seen as, Islamic world was seen as the place to be and the ideal of the world. But this somehow has been lost, and remains so to this day.
Okay, so we can gather from this that the moral teachings of Islam are definitely not on the side of wealth inequality, of discrimination, but rather they are the very opposite. And they go together, as you said, they align with left-wing values and values of solidarity, of looking out for your neighbor, helping out, self-realization, and all of these things that the left and the progressive movements majorly advocate for. And so this, I think, does link to also a consumerist society and, putting rapid consumption as a priority rather than spiritual development and growth. And I don't know if this is linked to this, but what was it that made you go back to religion after living a hedonistic lifestyle? Like, is this linked to that aspect of you going back to it?
Well, it had been, ever since I was 18 to the age of 21, 22, I was living this sort of lifestyle. And I think a lot of it was the fact that my roots, what I was born with, was so different. I felt that, I'd moved away so much from what I believe was a more moral person and someone who thought more of the consequences of what I was doing, how they would affect other people. Whereas when I lived in a hedonistic lifestyle, what I used to only, place myself first. It can sometimes be, and I'm not saying this for all people who live that sort of lifestyle, but it can often be a very individualistic type of lifestyle, putting yourself first. Whereas I truly believe that to live a spiritual lifestyle is to live a selfless lifestyle, putting other people's first. And that's where, you know, that's where I found my most pleasure. One of the best times of my life was actually when I went to Nepal and I was helping in an orphanage. That sort of selflessness was something which I missed. I felt like I was putting myself first. I wasn't thinking of the consequences I doing. I just sort of wanted to have, fun all the time. And it's, fun sometimes, but when you're doing that sort of lifestyle all the time, first of all, physically, it's not healthy. I didn't think I had the stamina to maintain that sort of partying lifestyle. And secondly, I felt myself alienated from, my community as well. There's sort of like an unspoken brotherhood, a sisterhood between fellow Muslims, and I felt that I'd lost that along the way. I didn't have the same level of compassion which I used to have towards, a fellow human. So I felt like it was important for me to turn back to, back to who I was without being, conditioned or brainwashed in a certain way.
Yes, I feel like we can grasp this in your article, and as you discussed in it, why was Ramadan particularly important and special for you this year?
Well, Ramadan is always a highlight of every Muslim year. As I mentioned in my article, it's based on the moon cycle. It's a different time every year. For 30 days every year, we observe a fast from sunrise to sunset, to really practice discipline, to, feel compassion for those who, feel a state of hunger all the time. Those who live in poverty are in a perpetual fast, which no human should have to go through. To practice self and to get closer to God, the relationship, the connection between yourself and God, because it is stated in the Quran that the greatest relationship and means a human can have with God is the direct one with no intermediate at all. So that is what the essence of Ramadan is, to become spiritual more within yourself and to turn within yourself first, look within yourself for your own flaws, for your own mistakes before you try and guide others, to become disciplined and avoid sort of hedonistic activities which can be unhealthy for your body, such as smoking, alcohol, etc. And to really focus on the core principles of Islam is to love your family, be grateful for your family, be grateful for the food on your table, be grateful for your community as the community comes together in Islam. And this year, of course, with the pandemic, it was particularly special because it brought into perspective, those who are those who aren't just, always hungry, but those who are, sick right now, or those who are, living in difficult conditions because of the pandemic, the poverty stricken, the working classes, how difficult it must be for them. So Ramadan was, twice as special this year because a lot of Muslims around the world, we were not just praying for those who are poor, we were praying for those who are sick. We are praying for those who are poor but have more risk of being sick, because obviously it's been proven that the poor, the ones who live in poverty, have more chance of being ill. So that's why Ramadan was so special. The feeling of gratefulness and that you have for being for me myself being in the privileged position that I am.
Yeah, and it's reading your article, it became so clear to me how deeply misunderstood, Ramadan and Islam generally, and just being a Muslim person, like it's so clear that we are treating it in such a deeply flawed way and wrong, and just as a means to oppress. And I would like everyone, especially white people who think, that we are some sort of like the good ones, like we are not. And also we need to truly realize how we've been led to think that Islam is this bad or dark thing, or like totalitarian, or all of this these stereotypes. And I had been thinking about it for a while, and I think all my fellow white people have to do the same. And we need to keep doing it, and just hearing what it means to you, like firsthand, I think should make us being even more aware of this dynamic, and of the fact as well that even though Islam, but this goes for other religions as well, originally they tend to be very based on solidarity and on love, and they just get completely manipulated by the right wing and totalitarian right wing regimes and governments. Um, and yeah, I feel like we need to make that point. And I want to ask you as well, on a personal level, is there a specific part of the Quran that resonates with you personally?
So yeah, the two most important verses for me personally in the Quran is one verse about an Arab not being superior to another Arab, and all humans being equal. So, for example, if we were to put it in today's context, which is so important, if you were to follow an Islamic mindset, an Arab wouldn't be superior to a non-Arab, or a white wouldn't be superior to black. And this is a really important point, because religion has been used so much for centuries to persecute people such as black people, to keep them in slavery, whereas Islam, I know, and Christianity as well, but I speak for Islam. But Islam has always promoted racial equality, and to say that all man is equal. And in fact, if there is a minority, or someone who has a skin color and who is disadvantaged because of that skin color, it is our duty to help them. For example, if we would put it in today's context, the black community are the ones who have been historically institutionally racialized and been victims of racism. They've faced systemic racism, subtle racism, and every type of racism you can imagine. They have faced it. But the Prophet Muhammad would argue that being suffered as they have, it is our duty to actively and positively, specifically help them over other people, because they are the ones who have suffered the most, and they are a minority who have unfortunately suffered the way that they have and been persecuted, and therefore they are in the most need, and we need to help them in every way that we can. A second favorite verse for me is in the Quran, promoting nonviolence, which states that if you are to kill one man, it is as if you have killed all of mankind, and if you save one man, it is as if you saved all mankind. So this verse really resonates to me, because it reflects how precious the human life is in Islam. The value of the human. Each and every single person is valuable, and to take life away from one person, no matter what religion, what color skin they are, is an atrocity, a tragedy, and it's as if you've completely ended the world completely. So that because it really reflects to me the preciousness of human life. Each person is so precious and so special, and we are to treat them with dignity. No one deserves to have their life lost, whether they are Muslim, non-Muslim, white, black, no matter where they come from. Every human is equal, and this really also resonates with me, because it just reflects how much compassion is in the teaching of Islam, and how it doesn't promote nonviolence, and is a peaceful religion as well. It doesn't say go out and kill people. It says go out and treat each person equal. Because if you kill one of them, it doesn't say that if you kill one Muslim, you are killing all whole mankind, but it says if you kill one innocent, someone who has nothing to do with any sort of warlike situation, someone who is collateral damage, their death is senseless. And also at the same time, is if you see someone in trouble, someone who needs saving, it's a blessing for you. It's a miracle if you do that, because it's like you're saving the whole world. So that, for me, those two are very special verses for me.
I love them too, and I really love what Islam preaches. I really love this idea of justice and solidarity, and I really hope that we keep talking more and more about this, and that people realize what Islam truly is, instead of the immense number of stereotypes that they've encountered, sadly. So Hajra, thank you so much. I always love your contributions, and I think you're amazing, because you have the experience, the ideas, and you also, the way that you explain it just makes things very clear. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you.